So the telharmonium was one way of generating electronic music. But another way came about from a relatively bizarre angle. Essentially, a distant relative of the synthesizer is the incandescent light bulb. Seriously. And here's why. When Edison was designing the light bulb, he had this problem where the inside of the light bulb would be blackened. And he believed this was due to particles that were being released inside of the light bulb from the filament. So he had the idea of creating a positively charged plate that would reside inside the light bulb with the filament so that the negative particles that he believed were responsible for this problem would be drawn to the positive plate and away from the interior of the glass light bulb. Well, when he did this, he found that the current would go towards the plate when the plate was positively charged, but would not go anywhere if it was negatively charged. Edison thought it was a curious effect, and he wrote about it. That was pretty much it until about 1904, when a man by the name of Fleming used this very principle to create what was essentially the first tube, which had a filament and a plate, and it was used to interpret radio signals. And then, in 1906, a man named Lee de Forest came along and created what he called the Audion tube, which had the filament and then a grid and then the plate. And by applying different voltages to the grid, you were able to actually amplify signals. So when this happened, it was incredibly groundbreaking because weak electrical signals could be amplified and made stronger. And that's when we started seeing microphones and started seeing speakers and these sorts of things. So the development of the first amplifier in the Audion tube was incredible. But there was another aspect that was interesting about the Audion tube. De Forest himself recognized that this tube could be used to regenerate oscillations. So in 1915, De Forest published a paper on producing musical notes via electrical means. He had used his Audion tube to basically create periodic electrical fluctuations, which is to say, he was able to consistently wiggle electrons in repeating waveforms, which means the man created a tube-based audio oscillator. And I think you probably already know enough about a synthesizer to know that this was really the origin of the synthesizer. When an electronic oscillator came into existence, that was the first point where the synthesizer as we know it became viable. We have the telharmonium, which electromechanically generated fluctuations in electrons, which equated with fluctuations in air molecules. Cahill had invented a electromechanical sine wave generating oscillator. But what De Forest did was create a simple, basic, small electronic oscillator. And the electronic oscillator is the key to synthesis as we know it. So this was the moment, the first step towards the synthesizer and towards synthesis.